Beirut, June 7, 2026, Sunday afternoon. Israeli airstrikes hit the Dahiyeh district, Hezbollah's stronghold in Beirut's southern suburbs. 2 people are killed, 20 are wounded. Plumes of smoke rise over a densely populated residential neighborhood. Hours later, Iran fires ballistic missiles at northern Israel, the first such attack since the April ceasefire. Israel's military says its defenses are not hermetic. Sirens sound across multiple cities. Iran's parliamentary speaker announces that all American and Israeli military bases across the Middle East are now, quote, legitimate targets. And Donald Trump, watching all of this unfold from Washington, goes on NBC's Meet the Press and says something that has never been said publicly by an American president about the leader of Israel. Netanyahu won't have any choice but to accept whatever agreement we reach with Iran. I call the shots. I call all the shots. He doesn't call the shots. My name is James Landon. What you just heard is not a diplomatic dispute. It is a public rupture between 2 of the closest allies in modern Middle East history, and it happened today. In the next 14 minutes, I'm going to explain exactly what broke, why it broke now, and what it means for every negotiation currently happening in the region. To understand today, you need the full sequence of the last 10 days, because what happened this afternoon didn't come out of nowhere. It is the result of a specific collision that has been building since late May. On June 1st, Trump called Netanyahu. According to 2 U.S. officials who spoke to Axios, Trump told him, and I'm quoting directly, "You're effing crazy. You'd be in prison if it weren't for me. I'm saving your ass. Everybody hates you now. Everybody hates Israel because of this." Trump confirmed the call 3 days later in a New York Post interview. His exact words, "I did. I was a little bit perturbed at his constantly fighting with Lebanon." What had triggered Trump's anger? Netanyahu had announced he was ordering the Israeli Air Force to bomb Hezbollah targets in Beirut. Iran immediately warned it would abandon nuclear negotiations with the United States if Beirut was struck. Trump, who needs that deal, told Netanyahu, "Stop." Netanyahu stood down for 6 days. On June 4th, the U.S. announced a ceasefire framework for Lebanon. Both governments signed. Trump presented it as a win. On June 7th, today, Hezbollah fired drones at northern Israel. Netanyahu ordered strikes on Dahiyeh. 2 dead, 20 wounded. Iran responded with ballistic missiles. And the ceasefire Trump announced 3 days ago collapsed before the week was out. Trump asked Netanyahu not to do this. Netanyahu did it anyway. That is the sentence that explains everything. Here is the concept that makes sense of all of it, and it comes from a Newsweek analysis published this morning that cuts directly to the core of the problem. It is called the alliance trap. The alliance trap is defined precisely as this: losing control over an increasingly aggressive partner while remaining stuck with the responsibility of defending it. Think about what that means for Trump right now in concrete terms. Trump needs a deal with Iran. Everything, the 60-day nuclear memorandum, the ceasefire framework, the Pakistan-mediated talks, is oriented toward one goal: an agreement that ends the Iran war, reopens the Strait of Hormuz, and brings oil prices below $100. Iran has stated one condition clearly: any deal must include an end to fighting in Lebanon. Iran's foreign minister said it explicitly in late May. Iran will not sign a nuclear framework while Israel, which Iran views as a U.S. client, is bombing Lebanese civilians with American-supplied weapons. Netanyahu understands this condition perfectly, and he has continued fighting anyway. Why? Because Netanyahu's objective is not Trump's objective. Trump wants a deal that stops the war. Netanyahu wants a deal that permanently eliminates Iran's military and nuclear capability, far more maximalist. But more immediately, Netanyahu wants to destroy Hezbollah while he has the military and political cover to do so. Hezbollah is Iran's most powerful regional proxy. Degrading it now before any nuclear deal freezes the situation changes Iran's strategic position permanently. Netanyahu is therefore using the window of American military dominance over Iran to pursue a Lebanese objective that Trump has explicitly asked him to stop. This is the alliance trap in its purest form. Trump is responsible for everything Israel does. American weapons kill civilians in Dahia. American credibility is spent every time a ceasefire Israel signed is violated hours later. American negotiators sit across from Iranian counterparts who point at the news and ask, "How can we trust you?" And Trump cannot walk away from Israel. The domestic political cost, evangelical base, Republican Congress, pro-Israel donors, is too high. He is, as a U.S. official described it this week, stuck. Now, I want to give you the specific exchange that happened today because it is historically significant. After the Beirut strikes, after Iran launched missiles at Israel, Trump went on NBC's Meet the Press. He said, "He won't have any choice. I call the shots. I call all the shots. He doesn't call the shots." Read that carefully. The President of the United States told the world on live television that the Prime Minister of Israel does not control American foreign policy. He said this after an ally had just bombed a capital city against his explicit request, triggering an Iranian missile attack that put American military personnel across the region directly at risk. This is not normal alliance communication. This is a public rebuke. And it follows a pattern that has been escalating for weeks. Trump told Netanyahu not to strike Syria. Israel struck Syria. Trump told Netanyahu not to strike Beirut. Israel struck Beirut. Each time, Trump expresses private fury and public restraint. Each time, Netanyahu calculates that Trump will absorb the damage rather than break the alliance. Today, that calculation may have reached its limit. "I call the shots" is not the language of a partner. It is the language of a superior issuing a final warning. Whether Netanyahu treats it as such is the central question of the next 72 hours. Let me explain what this means for the Iran nuclear negotiations, because that is where all of this ultimately lands. Iran's foreign minister spoke today with counterparts in Britain, Turkey, and Pakistani mediators. His statement addressed Israel's repeated violations of the ceasefire in Lebanon. He did not say talks were over. He did not declare a return to full-scale war. What Iran is doing, and has been doing since April, is using every Israeli escalation as leverage. Each strike on Beirut is a card Tehran can play at the table. It can say, "We cannot sign while this continues." It can demand that Washington restrain Israel as a precondition for any agreement. Trump cannot deliver that restraint, not reliably, because Netanyahu has demonstrated 3 times in 3 weeks that he will not be stopped by a phone call, however loud. This is the structural problem at the heart of the entire negotiating architecture right now. The United States is trying to close a nuclear deal with Iran. The success of that deal depends on stability in Lebanon that Israel is actively undermining. And Washington cannot compel Israel to stop. Not without threatening consequences it is politically unwilling to impose. Iran can see the gap between what Trump says and what he can deliver. That gap is the reason the deal has not been signed. And it may be the reason it never gets signed, before either the ceasefire collapses entirely or Iran decides that no deal is better than a deal built on a foundation this unstable. 3 things to watch in the next 72 hours. First, does Israel strike again? Netanyahu has said explicitly that Israel will hit Hezbollah in Beirut whenever Hezbollah attacks northern Israel. The cycle is self-reinforcing, and nothing has broken it yet. Second, does Trump impose any real cost? "I call the shots" is a statement, not a consequence. The question is whether Trump moves from words to action, suspending a weapons transfer, conditioning U.S. support publicly, issuing a formal demand with a credible threat. He has not done any of these things. If he doesn't now, Netanyahu will conclude that this warning, like the others, was rhetorical. Third, does Iran withdraw from negotiations? Today, Iran fired missiles and declared American bases legitimate targets. It also kept its foreign minister on the phone with mediators, both simultaneously. That dual posture, escalate and negotiate, cannot hold indefinitely. What Israel does in the next 48 hours will determine which side of that calculation Tehran prioritizes. Here is the frame I want to leave you with. What is happening between Trump and Netanyahu is a perfect illustration of a problem that has defined American foreign policy for decades. The powerful ally that Washington cannot control and cannot abandon. Trump came to office believing that personal relationships with leaders gave him leverage no previous president had. He believed he could call Netanyahu, tell him to stop, and Netanyahu would stop. Netanyahu has spent the last 3 weeks teaching Trump the limits of that belief, and the cost of those limits is being paid right now, in Dahia, in northern Israel, in the Strait of Hormuz, and in every room where an American negotiator sits across from an Iranian counterpart who points at the news and asks, "What exactly is it that you control?" Trump said today, "I call the shots." Netanyahu bombed Beirut anyway. My name is James Landon. Share this with someone who needs to understand what is actually breaking in the Middle East right now, before the headlines move on to the next incident. And I'll see you on the next one.